Let me just ask this question. How many of you know who is considered to be the patriarch or the father of the world's three great religions? Abraham. Interestingly enough, Abraham is considered to be the father not only of Judaism, but also Christianity, and what may surprise some of you, Islam. Abraham is considered to be the father of faith for all three of those religions and their people. Now, the story and life of times of Abraham in the Old Testament book of Genesis is a very long, very colorful, and very complicated story, to be quite honest with you. And quite truthfully, we have neither the time nor the desire for us to read or recite the unabridged story of Abraham's life. Therefore, let us read the abbreviated version, which is found in the book of Hebrews, chapter 11. So I invite you, if you have your Bibles, to open them to Hebrews chapter 11 as we read an abbreviated account of Abraham's life. Beginning in verse 8 of chapter 11, the writer of Hebrews tells us that by faith Abraham, when called to go to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going. By faith he made his home in the promised land, like a stranger in a foreign country. He lived in tents, as did Isaac and Jacob, who were heirs with him of the same promise. For he was looking forward to the city with foundations, whose architect and builder is God. And by faith, even Sarah, who was past childbearing age, was enabled to bear children because she considered him faithful who had made the promise. And so from this one man, and he as good as dead, came descendants as numerous as stars in the sky and as countless as the sand on the seashore. All these people were still living by faith when they died. They did not receive the things promised. They only saw and welcomed them from a distance, admitting that they were foreigners and strangers on earth. You see, after answering God's call, Abraham, quite honestly, never had a dwelling place more permanent than a tent. He left his home in Haran, not knowing where he was going, and he spent the rest of his life without ever reaching this permanent destination. Abraham was essentially a wandering pilgrim who never got to where he was going in this world. Abraham's faith in God was expressed by his unwavering dedication to the journey. He never considered himself to be in charge of the destination. That was going to be God's business. His faith never did depend on arriving at a destination. The point is, Abraham's life was a journey. And truth be told, so is ours. The tagline that we've had for years here at Linden is navigating the journey of life. It's a fact that you and I tend to ignore. We keep on trying to build permanent places for ourselves in this world when it's clear that we're not here to stay. We're not permanent residents. No one has ever been a permanent resident in this world. We come up from a beginning we cannot remember, and we journey toward a future we cannot see. In other words, we're on the road. We're traveling. And that's what I'd like for us to think about for a little bit of time together this morning. gentleman by the name of Charles Kuralt. Many of you probably can remember that name. He once wrote a book entitled A Life on the Road. And in that book, he reminds us that another author by the name of Ambrose Bierce defines the noun road as, quote, a strip of land that leads from a place where we do not wish to be to a place which it is futile to go. Kuralt said he was probably right, at least about the latter part. But he said what Ambrose Bierce fails to see is the joy of the journey. We keep wanting to settle down. We keep wanting to settle down as permanent residents. We want to be able to live a predictable forever right where we are. Unfortunately, that's just a desire that flies in the face of reality. We may never have Abraham's durable faith in the unseen and the unknown future, but you and I do face the same circumstances that Abraham had to face on this earth. Because you see, we are on a journey. And we cannot see and we do not know where it's going. And we either have a choice to develop the kind of faith that can accommodate our situation, or we will develop illusions of predictability and permanence, which, quite honestly, the circumstances of reality will periodically shatter and finally destroy them. Illusions are always temporary. Faith is the only reliable tool that we have at our disposal to deal with the unvarying reality of life. There's no way for you and I to learn enough in this short life to know everything. Nothing. We live 24 hours a day by faith in people and in systems that we cannot see and do not understand. We're dependent upon that which we cannot see. We're dependent on that which we do not fully understand. In short, we literally are a people who have to live by faith. Because the fact is, we don't have any idea what's going to happen in our lives tomorrow. Not only do we not have any idea what's going to happen in our lives tomorrow, we have no way of knowing what's going to happen next week, next month, or even next year. In one of her novels, Sue Grafton begins with a very strange and interesting paragraph that reminds us of the fact that we do not know what's going to happen. She writes, quote, "Sometimes I think how odd it would be to catch a glimpse of the future. A quick view of events lying in store for us at some undisclosed date. Suppose we could peer through a tiny peephole in time and look upon a flash of what was coming up in the years ahead. Some moments we see would make no sense at all. And some, I suspect, would frighten us beyond endurance. Time, of course, only runs in one direction. And it seems to do so, she says, in an orderly progression. Here in the blank and stony present, we are shielded from knowledge of events that await us, protected from the knowledge of the future by blind ignorance." Essentially, what Sue Grafton is saying is something that perhaps we have said from time to time. I wish I knew what was going to happen. Any of you ever said, I wish I knew what was coming around the corner? Be like the guy who said, I can see the light. The problem is it's the light of an oncoming train about to run over me. But the truth is, we all, from time to time, would probably have liked to had a glimpse of what our future holds. But at the same time, that very same future could scare us literally to death. That's just the way it is. The writer of Ecclesiastes, I think, puts it a little more succinctly when he says in chapter 3, verses 9, 10, and 11, God has made everything to suit its time. Moreover, He has given us a sense of time, past and future. But we cannot see what God is doing from the beginning to the end. In other words, like Abraham, we are pilgrims, not knowing how it all began and not knowing how it's all going to end. The only light we have is faith. Faith in an almighty God by whose hand we came into this world, unaided by any effort whatsoever on our own, and dependent upon that same God to have a safe exit from this world. Our business, our joy, and our life is the journey, not the destination. Now, it's true that most thoughtful people tend to develop some dream or some plan for their lives. You know, you've probably all been to seminars or conferences or heard speakers who said, you need a 5-year plan, you need a 10-year plan, you need to be making plans. Have a dream. The problem is some people spend a lifetime following a dream that someone else had for their lives, which is a pretty unsatisfactory way to live. And the other thing is that in spite of the well-laid plans and treasured dreams that we might have for ourselves or which others had for us, life seldom follows the path or reaches the destination that we thought it would. In his book entitled Callings, Finding and Following an Authentic Life, Greg Levoy writes, quote, I have heard it said that the best way to make God laugh is to proclaim your 5-year plan. And I would guess that's probably true. History is, above all, the story of change. It's riddled with the unexpected. Listen, I'm not saying you shouldn't set goals. Setting goals is fine. But putting those goals in concrete, well, that's not really wise. I mean, just stop and think for a moment. Just stop and think about where you are now. Think about where you live. Think about what you're doing. Think about what you're thinking and what your life is like for you. Now, with all that in your mind, let me ask you this question. Did you ever dream 5, 10, or 20 years ago that you would be where you are now? Chances are no. No. I mean, could you have possibly predicted all the things that were going to occur to you along the way? No. Our happiness is far more dependent upon flexibility than upon our stubborn pursuit of dreams and plans that simply were not meant to be. All of life is simply an adjustment to those things that are not planned. Okay? And unless we adjust ourselves to the inevitable and unexpected, my guess is you will never find joy, you'll never find peace. Not only can we not see what's happening at the beginning of our journey, we make all kinds of unanticipated stops and detours along the way. Listen, again, our happiness is far more dependent upon our flexibility than anything else. The essence of life is what happens to us on the way to what we had planned. And everything that happens to us simply makes the difference. The myriad of changes that occur in our lives and in the living of our lives, we cannot possibly predict. We have absolutely no idea what's going to happen from one day to the next. Neither do we know how we're going to be changed by what happens to us. Because you see, our journey's filled with surprises. It was that great theologian Forrest Gump who once said that life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. The problem is that for a lot of people, the surprise element in life is a source of great anxiety. And that anxiety often results in the fear of the unexpected. And that fear of the unexpected is, more often than not, rooted in a more basic fear. The fear of losing control. Because you see, there is nothing that can distract more from the joy and success and peace of our journey than obsessing efforts to somehow gain and maintain control of our environment and the people in it. It's as simple as that. The problem is an unchecked desire for control, if we're not careful, can twist our lives out of shape. Our unchecked desire for control can poison relationships. Our unchecked desire for control can decrease acts of human kindness and compassionate consideration for those around us. Because you see, at the very root of human greed and a lack of respect for the rights and feelings of other people is this unbridled desire to gain complete control and have everything exactly the way we want it. Some of the most frustrated people that I talk to are people who, quite honestly, want to be in control. They want total control. And whenever they find themselves in situations and circumstances over which they have no control, well, they become anxious. I got a phone call yesterday morning from a friend. And she was telling me that another mutual friend of ours had just been diagnosed this past week with breast cancer. They found a spot in one of her breasts. And she called asking if I thought Wakita would call and talk with Allison. And I said, I will tell her. And Wakita did indeed call her last evening, and they spent I don't know how long on the phone. And in talking to the friend, I said, I'll have Wakita call her, and then I said, I'll follow up. And I said, Wakita probably will be able to answer more of the questions than I can. But I said, I may be able to tell her some things in regards to how we approached Wakita's cancer and how we have chosen to approach my cancer. And I said, there are three pretty simple things. I said, number one, live it one day at a time. Number two, do not worry about those things over which you have no control. Now, I know that's hard, but I will tell you this. To obsess and to worry about things over which you have no control will drive you crazy. And I said the third thing that I will tell her is there is absolutely no need to project a bridge that you have yet to even come to. You just can't do it. Because if you start thinking about what might happen, and you have one of these people that have a desire to be in control, the last two words I would offer you is good luck. Good luck. To which my friend said, well, there is one other thing you might want to tell her. I said, what's that? And he said, you tell her she has to be number one. In other words, everybody else is going to have to relax a little bit. Listen. so many people in our culture and in our society are obsessed with this idea or this need that they somehow are in control, or at least they need to be in control. The journey is filled with surprises. And God works in mysterious ways in our lives. He works in mysterious ways in the life of the world. He works through strange people. He works through strange circumstances. And here's the thing. God is not bound by our limited vision of possibilities. In other words, if you and I are willing to let God be the Lord of our journey, then we better be prepared to be surprised. In fact, it has been suggested that God's other name is surprise. I remember when I was in high school, our pastor was preaching a sermon on prayer. And I can remember him telling us that God answers our prayers in one of three ways. Yes, no, wait. I have now come to learn that there is yet a fourth possible answer to our prayers from God. And that response is yes, no, wait. Have I got a surprise for you? And there is a very real sense in which our spiritual maturity can be measured in direct proportion to our capacity to live creatively with unanswered questions. There's a real sense in which our spiritual maturity can be measured in direct proportion to our capacity to live with unsolved mysteries. There's a real sense in which our spiritual maturity can be measured in direct proportion to our capacity to live creatively with the surprises of life. One of the last things I would say is that our journeys are not the same. Each of us are called to a journey that is uniquely our own. Why? Because we are uniquely and profoundly different from one another. Just look at how different. Just look and listen. People are different, you know. We look different, we think different, we act different. But the outward differences that we see in people are often minimal compared to the differences that we cannot see. That is, what's inside. Our journey is uniquely our own. Why? Because we are unique. And if we try to simply follow someone else's journey, then we're going to be lost. If we try and impose our journey on other people, well, we'll do them a great disservice. Unfortunately, we tend to live in a society that pressures us to conform in so many ways, so many subtle and sometimes not so subtle ways. And think about, we're bombarded with reasons as to why we should use a certain toothpaste or drive a certain vehicle or whatever. And at the same time, it's not that unusual to encounter religious persons or religious groups which are trying to press everyone into the same spiritual mold. Okay? While at the same time, it's obvious that our God who brought us into existence made us different from one another. So the question becomes, wouldn't it be illogical and quite strange if God were now wanting us to all be alike? Think about that. I will grant you that there are an awful lot of people that are confused by the variety of conflicting religious views that are so often offered, and so often offered with unbending authoritarianism. I've said it for years. I think, in fact, no, I no longer think, I believe that it's very proper to beware of religious spokespersons who are absolutely certain about everything and who leave absolutely no room for the essential element of mystery in the human journey to know God. Because after all, it's often difficult to know who's right and who's wrong when there are so many voices out there calling for our attention. Granted, while it's true that people can help us on our spiritual journey, if we boil it all down, we may possibly be the best authority on what it is we need along our spiritual journey. And here's another thing you may want to remember. Nobody can make the journey for you. Regardless of how much they care about you, regardless of how much they love you, no person can make the journey for you. And while I'm on it, just add this. We would do well if we were to avoid bumper sticker religion. Because bumper sticker religion is really nothing more than a very simplistic approach to the complicated problems of people and society that may sound good, but more often than not will fail the test of reality. To try and make everyone alike is to attempt to avoid the pain and the heavy lifting that comes with careful thought, that comes with careful consideration of the differences with which God has made us, and differences with which God has sent us into the world. Listen, each and every person in this room is on a different journey. As I mentioned earlier, tagline for Linden is navigating the journey of life. And that's what it was for a number of years. But several years ago, we added one last word. Navigating the journey of life together. Listen, celebrating and living our unique journey does not mean that we cannot blend important parts of our lives with others and walk with them in a higher calling, a higher unity, a higher purpose, a higher mission. We don't achieve unity by persuading everyone to be like us, okay? Nor do we achieve unity by finding the lowest common theological denominator. Because our loyalty is not to a set of human-made theological propositions. And let's be honest, all theological propositions are human-made. Our common loyalty is not to some theological construct. Our common loyalty is to none other than Jesus Christ himself. Listen, don't get lost on somebody else's journey. You were born into this world to live a journey of your own. And the most important task in your life is to, like Abraham, find that journey and spend a lifetime being faithful to it. That's the key. That's the key.